Welcome back. Let's begin today by reflecting on the past week. Take a moment as a small group to share together. How did you go sharing your story? In this session, we're going to continue to learn how to share our story in conversations. It's so valuable to know how to share our story, but it's also an important skill in learning when to share our story and how to keep it conversational. And so in this session, we will practice our why story and then learn when is the best time and how can we actually share those stories well. Before we push on, I just want to say that you have an incredible story. I've heard people play down their stories saying things like, my story isn't interesting or my story won't connect with anyone. The truth is God has written your story and has carried you through it. Your vulnerabilities, your hopes, your unique fears and strengths and passions, they've all been woven into your story to bring glory to God. A really important part of discovering how to share your faith is remembering what you have to share. And surely our experience of God also feeds into our desire to share Him with others as well. You know the good news that Jesus is the risen King. Your life has been changed by His love and mercy. He has made you new. Faith conversations, they provide this beautiful opportunity for us to open ourselves to someone else and allow God to use us to reveal what He has done in and through our lives to others. In our small groups, we're going to continue just practicing our stories. So we're going to just pause in a moment and everyone's going to get a chance to share their story. Maybe you can reuse the story, the testimony that you used last week, or maybe you want to share a little different snippet of your story. Just allow 2 minutes per person to share their story. Enjoy hearing one another's stories. And once everyone has shared, just take a moment to reflect on that experience of sharing and listening as well.
It's unlikely that a not yet Christian will say to you, "Can you please share your testimony with me?" So we need to be on the lookout for moments where we will be able to share a snippet of our testimony. These sorts of moments might be appropriate. Your friend has shared something that relates to your lived experience. For example, they might say, I feel really lonely. Or is this all there is to life? And you might be able to respond with, "You know what, I really understand that. I've felt that too. Can I share with you what's made a difference in my life?" Another example of a moment where you might be able to share your snippet testimony is, say you've been asked if you're religious or if you go to church, and you're able to answer that. Or perhaps someone has commented that there is something different about you. I remember one of our neighbours once saying, "You're the nicest person I know." And I joked saying, of course, you don't know very many people. She doesn't get out much, really. But I was also able to say, actually at my core, I'm not that nice. I'm very average, but I do know Jesus and I walk with Him and He has shaped me over a long period of time. Other times, you might be able to share a snippet of your testimony if you've been asked a spiritual question. For example, someone might say, "Why are all these bad things happening to me?" And it's probably not a request for an apologetic on suffering, but rather a compassionate answer such as, "I don't know why these bad things are happening, but I do believe that there is a God who sees you and who cares. Would it be okay if I prayed for you about those things?" You might also be able to springboard from a question that someone asks. I remember once being in pre-theatre in hospital, and we were held up a bit because the surgery before mine was complicated. And so I had nurses lined up along my bed, and one of them said, where would you be if you weren't here right now? Well, the answer was I'd actually be in a deacon's meeting at church. But it was, I think in that moment I had the option to say, well, I'd be at work. But I actually chose to say, oh, I actually work for a church, and I would be doing something with them right now if I wasn't here. And it led to this brilliant faith conversation there in pre-theatre with about 3 nurses present. I think it's also helpful for us to learn how to give nuanced answers that people are asking. And so one of the questions that I get asked often is, what do you do for a living? And I've learnt that if I just say straight out, oh, I'm a pastor of a church, that it can just shut the conversation down really quickly. And so sometimes I might say something a little bit more subtle, like, oh, I lead an organisation that has a whole lot of volunteers, and we're trying to make a difference in our city. And that can open up a conversation that's more open and more exploratory with a person. I just encourage you to take time to reflect after you share a snippet of your testimony in conversation, and just think about what landed well and what felt clunky. What would you tweak next time? Because it's okay for us to be a learner in this. We don't get it right every time. And so we learn to do it better, and we learn to feel more comfortable with what we're doing over time. So in your small group, I'd love you to just share together. Has anyone had a chance to share your testimony with others, with those who don't yet know Jesus? And what was that experience like?
Don't forget, what we're doing here is we're learning a conversational form of our testimony. So it's important we keep the conversation going. Now, you may be interrupted by the person you're speaking with, or you only may get to share half of your story, and that's completely okay. Just go with the flow. That's what a conversation is. But if you do get a chance to share some of your testimony, a good idea is to actually finish with a question in return to them, to hand the conversation back to the other person. A conversation question that I will often, after sharing part of my testimony, would be, well, what about you? Have you ever sensed that you've had a spiritual experience? Or if they've asked about Christianity, or even just actually asked me why I'm a Christian or something like that, I'd probably ask, do you feel that you know much about the Christian faith? And in answering those questions, it just allows that conversation to go on. So what I'd love for you to do as a group is discuss what would be a good follow-up question if you were to share your testimony and flowing out of that. What I'd like you to do now is to practice your testimony again. Yes, I know, this is now the 3rd time. Practice your testimony again in pairs, but this time I want you to finish with a question. So as you share your story, ask a question back to the other person, passing the conversation back to them to express their interest, or for them to ask you more questions.
So this week, continue to practice your testimony. Maybe think about the different angles and the different snippets of your story. Maybe it's helpful to be conscious of the needs and the desires that you commonly encounter in conversations with other people. Perhaps there's a snippet of your story that could sow a good new seed into those conversations. Remember to keep the conversations going and the questions that flow naturally from your story. As well as practicing your story, pray. Let's ask the Lord for opportunities to sow seeds, to share parts of our story in conversation for His sake.